Last week of the regular season, folks, it is a huge, crucial two-game homestand for your Seton Hall Pirates. Coming off two tough losses on the road against two very good teams that are number 10 and number 2 now in the country, respectively. But we look ahead to a two-game homestand that could make or break the tournament resume for your Seton Hall Pirates. We're going to talk about that and a little bit more here on this week's edition of Hoist the Colors. I'm Tim Best. He's Pat Madden. I don't want to go into a lot of detail about the Creighton and UConn games. I mean, it'll probably be best if we don't. But just your synopsis of, a brief synopsis, if you will, of each of the two games that, let's be real, they just got away from the Pirates.
The only thing I could think of about the Creighton game and whether any of it carried into Connecticut or the store, like for example, Isaiah Coleman didn't make the trip out to Omaha because he was sick. Were there other players during the week who were passing bugs of sickness and bugs around of various points? And was that why they just looked totally lethargic, particularly in the last 10 minutes of the first half against Creighton? And then I just, look, let's be real here. As much as you can say Seton Hall made small mistakes, a couple of sloppy passes, that Connecticut game on Sunday was an exhibition. And, Donovan Clingan was every bit the Donovan Clingan everyone was expecting him to be. We couldn't get him in foul trouble. So then he was able to be as aggressive as he wanted to be on the inside. Then the three started falling. Cam Spencer knocks down. Cam Spencer actually got shut down pretty well, but Tristan Newton got almost everything he wanted. And, what's there to say? I mean, that's why Connecticut's number 2 in the country. That's why they're the favorites to repeat in a few weeks, because that's just a team that you have to almost anybody in the country has to be at their best to beat Connecticut, and or something catastrophic like Clingan getting hurt in the middle of the game has to happen for Connecticut to take a loss to a team like Seton Hall. So, a lot of people are like, we're upset with the margin of defeat in both of those games. They wish the games were closer. I think that only moves the net a few points. Seton Hall would have been somewhere in the 60s if they lost both of those games by 5 points. So they're still in the same spot they would have been regardless of how close or not close. The only way Seton Hall would have moved the needle would have been pulling off one of those upsets. Creighton is probably the better chance of winning those two upsets because, frankly, Creighton wasn't coming into that game playing very well. But, Baylor Shireman, Trey Alexander started knocking threes down. And, when they do that, they're as tough as anybody to beat in the country.
So, obviously, I think I mentioned on last week's episode, but going into the Creighton game, coming off the loss to St. John's, I'm like, I don't like the feel of this. I don't feel great about it. I feel terrible about it because of the fact that we're facing a Creighton team that is coming in pissed against us. And they want to take that anger out after playing like garbage against St. John's. Now they want to take it out on us. And yeah, they took it out on us and then some. And then with UConn, this was a Donovan Clingan revenge game. And it was very much that. I mean, he was every bit the monster that he looked like the entire time he was playing against us in Newark before the injury. And arguably, he blew that performance in the little time that he had. I think he had like 13 points in 17 minutes before he went down against Seton Hall and Newark. He was even more dominant in this game. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that, we couldn't get him in foul trouble. And that's one of the big three things you got to do to beat UConn. And unfortunately, shots weren't falling. We were also turning it over, committing careless fouls, and letting UConn knock down their threes. And that's something that UConn failed to do in the first meeting. And they got some home cooking at Gamble. They really, really wanted this one so that they could clinch the regular season title with that win, because Marquette had lost the day prior at Creighton. So there was that extra motivation and juice in the building that you could just tell, like, yeah, we're losing this game, but UConn just took it over the top. Tristan Newton was great. Stephon Castle had a nasty dunk. They just had everything going for them. That it was their day, and there was little to nothing that Seton Hall could have done to prevent that. So honestly, it's kind of best that we turn the page now to this last week of the regular season. Um, and it starts with Villanova tomorrow night. And you know what? This week, even though there's different context, circumstances surrounding these two games, they very much remind me of 5 years ago. We had a 2-game homestand to close the regular season against Marquette and Villanova. Granted, DePaul is not either of those teams by a wide margin, but it's a 2-game homestand to end the regular season that could make or break the tournament resume. Right now, Seton Hall on the right side of the bubble, kind of around that, last four buys, last four in. Some geniuses out there, and I use the term geniuses in a very sarcastic way, think that Seton Hall is not a tournament team. But here's the thing. I mean, Brian said it. Brian Franklin said it. We don't have a bad loss. We also have wins over UConn and Marquette. Those two wins, they aged really well, number one. And number two, they still carry weight this late in the season because UConn is going to be a 1 seed, barring some unforeseen setback that is going to just knock them down to the 2 line. I mean, they're the Big East regular season champs. They're 26-3. And one of those losses was against us. And after they lost to us, they rattle off 14 in a row. But now you take on a Villanova team that I called this when we had B Frank on there. This is now a quad one opportunity because they're up to 26 in the net. And I hate the fact that I'm thinking about this now. This could be an opportunity where we beat Villanova and they go down to quad two. But then again, they could go right back up to quad one if they beat Creighton Saturday. But with this current quad one opportunity ahead of them, we haven't beaten Villanova at home since that senior day in 2019, the Powell from Trenton woo shot. I was there for that, and I'm pretty sure I blacked out when that shot fell. That whole sequence was nuts with Mamu getting the block, followed by the Powell shot. What do we got to do to shake off that 26-point blowout loss on Super Bowl Sunday?
Now, the first thing Seton Hall has to do a lot better than a lot of people have done lately is make sure that you have somebody on the shooters. And there are two shooters I am more worried about than anybody else. And we mentioned Brendan Housen 3 weeks ago before that blowout in Philadelphia. Because let's be honest, Villanova has discovered Brendan Housen, and Brendan Housen has answered the bell during the second half, and he might be the game changer from why Villanova was sitting in the middle or the lower of the pack to now where Villanova is pounding on the door to a first round bye. I think the fact that he finally, they got him in the right spots, they're playing him the right number of minutes, and they're giving him opportunities. I mean, leave that guy open 25 feet away, ball's going in the basket. I think that's just the way things have gone. I mean, if you watched any of the game against Providence on Saturday, and I saw the whole thing, it's like, okay, when is Providence finally just going to stop switching people off, which of course is one of Seton Hall's major issues, as we noticed a little bit on Sunday, is that Seton Hall switches everything. And unfortunately, when you play a defensive strategy like that, if a team can move the ball around well enough, somebody's going to end up being open. And the other guy you got to keep somebody on at all times is Justin Moore, who I think Moore has made a really nice development from trying to be, a be-all slasher to the basket to a guy who just picks his spots. Sometimes he's standing at the 3-point line, and he's as good a 3-point shooter as he's ever been. Sometimes he'll take the ball and he'll try to back you down, Colin Gillespie style. So I think the other thing you have to do is, if you're on Justin Moore, just be in his face, be aggressive. See, this is a good spot for a Dylan Adewusu. because Wusu can push more around a little bit. He can be a little bit more physical with Justin Moore. He can make Moore think about doing things that other guys. I mean, I think the guy they put on more often than not on Saturday was either Garway Dole or Ticket Gaines. And as good of players as those two are, they don't have the physical attributes that Wusu has. Wusu can just muscle up to Justin Moore and make him think about making moves to the basket. The answer for Hausen, I think, is Alamir Dawes. One thing that Alamir Dawes, because Dawes has a shooter's mentality, Dawes also, on the flip side of that, knows how people beat him when he's looking to take his shot. And I think most of that has to do with just make sure that you do your best to either deny him the ball or make sure that there's a hand in his face to make him thinking about pulling the trigger on a 3-point shot. So I think if you keep Hausen and Moore in check, that doesn't dismiss what TJ Bamba, Hakeem Hart, or Eric Dixon can do for you, but that takes away a big aspect because, some of what's going on in Villanova is that they're sort of calling back what made them so successful in the Jay Wright era, that they would shoot the three often and efficiently enough where they would put people away, which is what they did against Providence on Saturday afternoon. It's a little bit of what they did against Georgetown, and it's certainly a little bit of what they did against us down in Philadelphia 3.5 weeks ago.
Yeah, and a lot of that, again, you talk about, contesting the shot. We did not do a very good job of that Super Bowl Sunday, and that's why a lot of Villanova's threes fell. Like, you got to contest the 3-point shot because they have so many options. And in one case, Hausen, a lethal option to shoot from anywhere on the court. And like, I know sometimes he's pulling up 25-foot bombs, 25 plus. Like, doesn't matter. Get a hand up, contest the shot. So Seton Hall, like, they've learned their lesson, and now they just have to go out there and apply that against this Villanova team. And again, they play a lot of a 5-out system, and Dixon is that stretch 5 who can still go down low and bang you around like against Bediako and EHE or whoever ends up guarding him because, like you mentioned, Seton Hall switches everything. So you never know who might get paired up with Dixon if he tries to post up on the block. The only big guy that really stays down low for Villanova is Ware. And even then he comes off the bench. So I'm more concerned with defending the 3, number 1. Number 2, they're going to protect the rock. So with that in mind, doing the most to try to force turnovers might not be a good idea because they might take some gambles. And if that gamble doesn't pay off, that's going to lead to a wide open 3 or a wide open bucket of some sort. Their ball movement has improved so much ever since, I believe it was the game where they were chanting Fire Neptune against Marquette, maybe about a week and a half before they faced us. Their ball movement has drastically improved, and so is their offensive efficiency to coincide with that. So the big key is, again, I think you have to win this game on the defensive end because the good defense, if you can force bad possessions, that'll lead to good offense because you have to essentially have their kind of mentality on offense where just don't turn it over, don't take stupid shots, and you can find a way to get in transition. If you're going to take a transition 3, you better make sure it's a damn good one. And Alamir Dawes is one of the best guys in the conference at taking transition 3s. It's crazy how he just has a knack in transition of getting to a spot, taking a shot where he's got a foot out front and just pulling, and especially at home, hitting nothing but the bottom of the net. So that I would say that's my keys to victory for the Pirates. I mean, on a scale from 1 to 10, how important would it be for Seton Hall to get this win ahead of what should be a layup against DePaul?
Well, if they win both this week, they're in the tournament. I don't think
Undeniable,
anybody's going
yes.
to, regardless of how that Villanova game ends up in terms of quad one, quad two. You also have the factor that it knocks Villanova off of the bubble. I think I think Villanova has to win both of these games, even though their metrics are very good. I think that they would be starting to rack up too many losses if they lose this game because they're also, unless they win the Big East tournament, they're going to have 14 losses. And I think that puts them. So I think Villanova's sort of these two, I think they're must wins. Other bracketologists think that because one of these wins this week would be a quad one for Villanova, that gives them enough resume stuff to make the tournament. Look, Villanova is going to come out to try to win this game regardless, because that's just, the other thing that you got to keep in mind with Villanova in terms of a narrative here is that Justin Moore and Eric Dixon were on the Final 14 2 years ago. They are the last of the Jay Wright players on that roster.
Hey, don't
They
forget about Chris Archidiakono.
that's okay. But the point is, they're the two guys who play. They're the two guys who get significant minutes, who were on the 2022 team. That a lot of people didn't think they had any business making the Final Four, but because they were determined, because they were being coached by Jay Wright, they just knew what they had to do to win. And that's what's been showing up for the last few weeks for Villanova. What's gone on is that, they Moore and Dixon are the leaders, and guys like Housen and Bamba and Burton and Hart and Ware and Armstrong follow the leaders, just like the way it's always been for Villanova. So I think the second half of that game against Providence on Saturday, we saw a Kyle Neptune team look as close to a Jay Wright team as we've seen in those 2 seasons. And if that carries over, because the other thing we haven't talked about is against the Villanova defense that has shut some people down lately. Big second half against Providence. Big second half against Georgetown. Big second half, I think it was a week and a half ago, against Butler. How does Seton Hall score against that defense? And what they do well, particularly against Kadari Richmond, is that they clog the paint. Maybe, I don't know if they have one particular guy, maybe Hart, maybe Bamba, who can defend Richmond themselves. But what happens is that they just sort of have that way of getting, they do a great job helping on defense. And the guys who help also have a knack for being able to cut off pick and pop outs. So you could say, all right, easy answer is Richmond drives the lane, hits Dawes, open for a three. The problem is the guy who comes over to help, also stays in a good position defensively, where he's got one eye on, he's coming over towards Richmond, but he's got his eyes on where the ball might be going, so that if he's anticipating, if Dawes is sitting 25 feet out, that one of the moves Richmond could make when he's driving to the basket, if he gets stopped by a double team, he's ready to pick off a pass that might go to Richmond, or might go to Dre Davis, or might go to Dylan Adewusu or somebody else trying to hit a jump shot. So, I mean, that's sort of like when you make your attack, you got to find a way to make something happen when you attack. I mean, Eric Dixon's not a great shot blocker. Ware is a better shot blocker than Dixon. But again, the idea here is not so much they don't need to block a shot to stop Richmond. What they need to do is put bodies in front of him to make his shots that much difficult. And they do that as well as anybody. They've done this as well as anybody in the Big East. I mean, look what they did to Devin Carter on Saturday. Devin Carter could get nothing going in that game. And if they do that to Richmond tomorrow night, as well as Seton Hall's defense might play, you have to score in order to win. So, then you got to find maybe Dylan Dewusu has to be more aggressive. Maybe we have to find a way to get them into foul trouble. Maybe we have to exploit mismatches a little bit better. Dre Davis is very good at exploiting mismatches. The other thing that we should have tomorrow night that we didn't necessarily have on February the 11th is a healthy Jaden Bediako. If you
Yes.
remember,
Yep.
Bediako had a touch of the flu in that game and played very limited minutes. And it was clear that Elijah Hutchins Everett, as well or not well as he's played all season, was not ready to match up against Dixon and Ware. Now, if you have 100% Jaden Bediako in that game, not only does he make it difficult for Dixon to make moves on the inside, but he also, as we've unfortunately seen way too many times, loves wandering out to the 3-point line to stop people. So whereas other centers in the Big East like Ryan Kalkbrenner and Oso Ighodaro might not be as comfortable going out to 25 feet to stop Eric Dixon, Bediako, for some strange reason, loves being 25 feet out. Maybe it was times when he had to defend Drew Timme Gonzaga, because Drew Timme liked to pop out and hit jump shots. So maybe he can play upon that experience in trying to contain Eric Dixon. So I think the key here is that, make sure you have a plan on offense that can be effective, that if you're not hitting shots, you can maybe draw some fouls against Villanova. And then, of course, playing the defense the way you have to play the defense against those offensive weapons.
So another thing that really concerned me from the first meeting was the fact that Villanova did a great job of forcing us into taking as many threes as we did. And like that's not who Seton Hall is. We shouldn't be taking 33s in a game. Like that's just not who we are. And that was Villanova's game plan and we kind of submitted to it. So now Shaw's plan, and I love that I'm using that term and I'm not even trying to, but Shaw's plan here is they know that they're going to do everything they can to force them to the perimeter to take threes to get them to do something they're not comfortable with. Shaw is going to have a counter to that one way or the other because he's not going to allow Villanova to beat them again and to submit to their game plan. Like Seton Hall wants to dictate the tempo. They want to dictate what they do on offense and on defense for that matter. And a lot of that has to start with not allowing Villanova to dictate how they play their offense. Don't allow them to force you into taking threes. Take the threes that you want to take instead of making Villanova coerce you into taking threes. And that's something that's going to be in the scouting report and in the game plan for Shaheen Holloway and his staff. And I think they're going to make the proper adjustments. And they need to play a hell of a lot better than they did on Super Bowl Sunday. But that's kind of like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. I know. Like everybody knows they got to play a hell of a lot better than they did Super Bowl Sunday if they want to win this game. But overall, this is the last week of the regular season. I think we're still, in terms of clinching a first round bye, it's really in our control. If we win Wednesday night, we got a first round bye. Like that's a lock. And I think in turn, I think that locks us up as the 4th seed, if I'm not mistaken, unless no. Creighton has the tiebreaker over us. So even if they lose to
No, it would
Villanova,
clinch it. Now, right now, the way the tiebreak, if they win either game, they get the bye.
right?
The
And
issue
I'm
would
talking about
be
specifically getting the 4 seed.
the difference. I don't think there's a much difference. Be honest to me, there's no real difference between the 4 seed and the 5 seed. There are scenarios where Seton Hall could sneak into the 3 seed if Seton Hall sweeps, and I think Marquette loses. I think if Marquette loses a game, Seton Hall can sneak. I forgot what the scenarios
Oh
were.
wait, no. You're right. You're right because Seton Hall can sneak into the 3 seed, but I think only in one scenario, if I'm not mistaken. So Creighton would have to beat Villanova Saturday. and Marquette would have to lose both games to UConn and Xavier with Tyler Kolek being out. That's a real possibility because Seton Hall will, the tiebreaker being they split the regular season and then they go to what's your best win. Seton Hall, by that virtue, would have beaten UConn and Marquette, having, if the scenario plays out, they will have lost twice to UConn. Therefore, Seton Hall owns the tiebreaker with UConn, and we get the 3 seed. Good news, the 3 seed's good because you play either the 6 seed, or if by some miracle DePaul gets to the quarterfinals, we see DePaul. But let's be real, that's not going to happen. But the only bad news is it happens at 9:30 Thursday night next week.
Well, I'm more worried about getting the 2 wins, getting the 20, getting the NCAA bid, and then what happens. I mean, New York. I don't know how much impact the Big East tournament is going to have on seeding. A lot of time, or whether you get in, a lot of times the committee puts its stuff down, puts down who are the bubble teams, and then makes a small list of where could somebody come in and take an at-large spot. So let's assume, for the sake of argument, Seton Hall wins against DePaul, gets to 19-12, and is in that last 4 in group. Then the question is, can 4 teams sneak up and steal? The bid stealers are at-large teams that they're teams that would win conferences that would not normally get an at-large bid. The Atlantic 10 is an example. Dayton, who is the best team in the Atlantic 10, has the resume to get an at-large bid. If they win the Atlantic 10 tournament, they get the automatic bid, and no one else from the Atlantic 10 gets in. But if somebody else like Richmond or VCU or Loyola win the Atlantic 10 tournament, they get the automatic bid, and Dayton steals a bid from someone who's the last 4 in. So that's something that could happen. That could happen in the Pac-12. Arizona and Washington State have at-large resumes, but if somebody like UCLA or Arizona State or USC wins the Pac-12, then Washington State and Arizona get at-large bids, and then the winner of that tournament gets the automatic bid and knocks somebody else in the last 4 in. So if you're in the last 4 in, which is probably where Seton Hall would be if they win just Saturday's game against DePaul, then you got to hold on for dear life and hope that a bunch of weird things don't happen in some of these other conference tournaments, you know?
I agree with you. Like, I'm trying to think of like really good examples from like the last couple years. Um, hmm, what
I
was
mean,
the word?
Georgetown stole a bid 3 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, so did a lot of other teams. Like Oregon State stole a bid, and then they rode that wave all the way to the Elite Eight. Like, I mean, but that was a weird year. 2021 was a weird season in college basketball.
Right, but that's the example of what that's something which Seton Hall fans would have. Again, you win 2 games, you have nothing to worry. Basically, the only thing you have to worry about at the Big East tournament, besides winning games there, is let's hope no one gets hurt in the Big East tournament.
Yeah,
And then you walk to Selection Sunday, either 20-12 or 21-12, and you figure out whether Seton Hall is getting a 10 seed or an 11 seed. If you only go 19-12, and then whatever happens in the Big East tournament, then you're basically saying, all right, I really want to see Seton Hall as an 11 seed, and we'll take Dayton at this point.
yeah.
And then the question becomes, who are there other teams that come in and take, does Florida Atlantic have to get an at-large bid because they don't win the American Conference? And weird stuff like that happens. So, I mean, I'm just looking at those. I mean, I'm sure there are other examples. I'm sure if we looked at last year, we could see this weird team won this conference. I mean, 2 years ago, Richmond did that in the Atlantic 10. Davidson was the best team in the Atlantic 10. Richmond beat them in the Atlantic 10 final. Richmond got a 12 seed. Davidson got a 10 seed, but it knocked somebody else off of the bubble. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
how bid stealing works. And that might be, that's where Seton Hall is at if they only win the game on Saturday.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I hate having to sweat it out selection Sunday. I remember,
You
um,
can have the field go to 96.
y- so
The
and the
field
thing
goes to
like
96. And that's not an issue.
so yeah, so I mean, it's funny. Like Grant Billmeyer literally told us the story. I mean, Kevin Willard, like just even with the record that they had, just like, well, I'm still sweating it out until we, it took them until the quarterfinal win over Creighton for them to not, for Kevin Willard to not feel like he had to sweat it out selection Sunday, even though he probably didn't have to sweat it out. And after they beat Xavier 2 weeks before that, which that anniversary just passed by, from 8 years ago. But yeah, the biggest thing, you win one, you feel good. Win two, you feel great. And I think I got faith in them. And I also have faith in the fact that, Villanova's more than capable of beating Creighton again. They beat them in overtime in Omaha without Justin Moore. So that's something to keep an eye on. And I think honestly, and I know you'll agree with this, in terms of certain teams that you lost to, or certain teams that you beat, like if we beat Villanova Wednesday, we'll be rooting for them to beat Creighton Saturday, because if they fall down to quad two, if they beat Creighton, depending on what it looks like, they could go back up to a quad one, and especially in what they could do, winning a game or two in the Big East tournament.
I think that conversation is basically moot once you win the Villanova game in terms of if you're getting into the tournament.
Right.
Uh, I think that's I think a lot of people like talking about this because it's sort of, but that's the conversation you have if you're a bubble team and
Yeah.
you're making your conversations about, is our resume better than Providence's? Is our resume better than St. John's? Is our resume better than Wake Forest?
And
Uh,
Virginia.
I heard Colorado in the conversation today. I mean, I
Yeah.
guess you could look at a number of, you can look at Jonathan Warner's, and net last four out. You can look at Brad Wachtel and his last four out, next four out, and say, here are the teams that this is your competition right now. There's a group of about 8 to 12 teams who are competing for the 4 spots in Dayton. Seton Hall right now is probably one of them. So then your question is, you're competing for, I mean, I would hate to put the Malouk on either St. John's or Providence. But, if Georgetown sneaks up sometime this week and picks one or both of them off, their large hopes are dead. You
Yep.
can you can take Providence and St. John's out of the conversation if Georgetown picks one of them off. I'm not gonna have DePaul picking St. John's off tomorrow night. Forget it. But I'm not trying. DePaul DePaul has no hope of winning. Let's hope I'm right in saying DePaul has no hope of winning either game they have this week. So
Sure.
don't look at that game tonight where DePaul's playing St. John's and say, all right, maybe DePaul's not picking anybody off. Georgetown's a team who's been competitive. They were competitive on Saturday against Xavier. They were competitive twice against us. They were competitive against St. John's down in Washington. They were competitive against Providence up on Ed Cooley Day at the Amp. So, turn the tables on those games. Maybe maybe Georgetown gives Providence something to sweat tonight. Maybe on Saturday at the Garden, the pressure gets to St. John's a little bit, and Georgetown can make that game interesting, because then that's one team you can just cross right off the bubble. Villanova is an interesting story. You lose to them tomorrow night, and I would personally rather see Villanova lose to Creighton on
In that
Saturday,
scenario, yeah, for sure.
regardless of the quad situation, because again, that gives them another loss, and that puts them. We would have 19 wins. They would have 18 wins. Again, that puts a scenario where maybe one loss this week. We don't know, because again, the committee. These are human beings. So you don't need Providence, St. John's, or Villanova being in as good a position as they can be, because that makes it harder for the committee to have to choose between Providence, St. John's, Seton Hall, Villanova, and any of those other schools in the bubble. So, if Villanova wins tomorrow night, we have to root against them on Saturday. Whether they beat Villanova, if we beat them tomorrow, a Villanova win would be nice Saturday because maybe it gives us a higher seed. Maybe it puts us in a 10-7 game instead of an 11-6 game, whatever the scenario. I'm not, again, what Villanova does on a Saturday doesn't matter to me if we beat them tomorrow night.
Yeah, agreed. I guess the larger point I was trying to go for was, the quote unquote bad losses we have. I hate the fact that I don't have a problem rooting for USC to finish strong because now with how well they've been playing lately, that's now a quad two loss, which is a little easier to stomach. And then Rutgers, on the other hand, I feel like it takes a lot of work for them to go from a quad three home loss to a quad two. But I don't have a lot of faith in them. And whether or not, you know, them winning games is going to help the resume, I'm sorry. I can't root for them. I never will.
I'll
I
give you
hate to say it.
I'll give you a team we lost to. We got to keep an eye on. Iowa.
Yes. Yes.
Iowa was not even in a lot of conversations for an at-large bid a few weeks ago, but now Iowa, I was gotten on. I was gotten on. I was won 4 out of the last 5, including games against Wisconsin, at Michigan State,
Yep.
and they beat Northwestern the other day at Northwestern,
Yeah.
and they play on Sunday evening against Illinois. And right now, Iowa's record is 18-12. So if Iowa gets a 19th win against Illinois, and we're sitting at 19 wins because Iowa beat us head to head. If the committee comes down to your last bid is between Iowa and Seton Hall, and Iowa's beaten Seton Hall, we're not making the tournament. So I think that's a team. If you're talking about teams we played against that we should be worried about, we would have to worry about that game Sunday night, Illinois at Iowa, and hope that Illinois, who I don't trust as far as I can throw Illinois finds a way to beat Iowa.
So what was the other thing I was going to say about yeah, speaking of teams that are getting hot, Villanova has won 5 of their last 6, by the way. Ever since they lost at Xavier in the infamous game where they had 18 seconds left to get one shot off and they couldn't even do that. They've won 5 of 6 since then. I'm trying to. So who have they played since then? Well, that 5 of 6 stretch started against Seton Hall. They've beaten Butler. They had 2 wins against Georgetown. And they won at Providence, and I'm trying to remember. Oh, and they lost at UConn. That was the one loss they had, and like there's zero shame in them losing to UConn. So we're facing a Villanova team that's hot. We're sliding a little bit, but the thing is, we're at home, and this is important for us to bring the energy to the Rock. And I know kids are on spring break, but it does, while they're on spring break, I think that should be like a bat signal to the rest of the fan base. The students are going to be here, so we got to pick up the slack now. So I'm hoping that this PSA will hopefully, resonate with people because this is a very important game. If we win this, we don't got to sweat it out selection Sunday. So all the fans that are going to be in the building, they got to do everything they can to make an impact and motivate these guys. I don't think the guys really need motivation to try to play well and win this game, but to get them over the hump and beat Villanova, something they haven't done again at home at least since Senior Day 2019. So that's my little, again, take a shot every time Timmy Ice makes a PSA to the Seton Hall faithful.
Yeah, I forgot who made this statement. It's the football coach who made this statement about it was something about if a game doesn't get you excited, then they compared it to the pilot light being out on the oven. This is Villanova. Uh, they've been a rival for more than 40, if not even before that.
Yeah.
This is the equivalent of the evil empire. If you're a Red Sox fan, you you should be fired up when you play the Yankees, even if the game doesn't mean anything. This is Villanova. This game means something.
Yep.
So I sort of the thing that worries you a little bit about tomorrow night is that, at least I'd say at least 30%, maybe 35% of the building's going to be Villanova fans. It's just the nature of what it is. Villanova fans buy Villanova. Some people have Seton Hall people buy them tickets so they can get Villanova tickets. It's just a weird way things work out there. And Villanova fans are not going to sweat buying they're not going to sweat going on StubHub or some secondary ticket market to pay whatever they need to pay to get in that building tomorrow night. I don't think they're selling into the upper deck. But it's anytime these two schools play, 10,000 seats is easy to sell out. It's really on the players to make sure that they keep the Seton Hall fans into the game. Because I think if Seton Hall, I'm not too worried about the fans getting excited about this game because it's Villanova. What I'm not excited about is if Seton Hall gets off to one of those slow starts and lets the Villanova fans in the crowd make most of the noise. So, I think sort of, again, if you're not into being excited about a Villanova game, then you shouldn't be in there. If you're a Seton Hall fan, you're not excited about Villanova, you shouldn't be there tomorrow night. You shouldn't be a fan. Villanova's one team. If there's one team you should get pumped up about playing, it's Villanova. And I think most of I'll give the fans a little more credit than that. I think they will be into this game tomorrow night. The question becomes, who will Seton Hall keep Villanova from making runs that help them build momentum in this game? It's a little bit harder for Seton Hall to make those types of runs because, frankly, we don't have the offensive weapons that Villanova does. But I think if you frustrate them, I think if you make it a tough night for the shooters, I think if you can keep Dixon at bay a little bit, then, you can keep the crowd into this game and you can do what you have to do to pull out what would arguably be maybe the biggest win Seton Hall has had in 2 years.
Yeah, I agree because, like while they have beaten, UConn and Marquette, this win will solidly put them in the NCAA tournament. Again, assuming that they beat DePaul as they should, because I mean DePaul is DePaul. You don't need to go into elaborate detail. And honestly, I'm not even going to bother previewing the game because it's just not worth my breath. It's not worth your breath. So, and again, I don't mean this in a slanderous way. So, Blue Demon Degen, Dibs, if you're watching this, I apologize. And DePaul Twitter, I love you. Just know that I love you and I care about you, and you deserve the world. You deserve a lot better than what you have right now. And by the way, speaking of DePaul Twitter, I hope you think that I look good in orange. I I wanted to make sure I said that before we officially logged off. But Pat, I think in the spirit of closing out, we actually talked about this at the end of after we finished recording last week. I always throw up the deuces, saying onward Teutonia, but I think you need to join me in flipping it around ahead of yes, sir. This is
I'm a,
this this
I'm a
is V's
stupid girl
down week.
from I'm a stupid college student from Butler.
You know what? I'm
She
cool
got,
with it. I'm
she got
I'm
a lot
cool
of
with it.
mileage on that one.
And I hope that becomes a thing, because Villanova hate seems to be, even with UConn back and being the top dog now, no pun intended. Villanova hate is still real amongst every other school in the conference, and even UConn too, because of the fact that they were a longtime rival of Villanova's, dating back to the very early days of the conference. So that is going to officially do it for this episode of Hoist the Colors. He's Pat Madden. I'm Tim Best, and when we come back next week, it'll be Big East tournament time. The best conference tournament in America is not even close at the world's most famous arena. We'll get you ready for that, and fingers crossed. And I think it's very almost a lock now that Seton Hall will be getting a first round bye, so we don't got to worry about taking the court again till Thursday, whether that be in the afternoon or by some chance with a little help from Marquette dropping their last two games, we could be playing at 9:30 at night as the 3 seed instead of 2:30 as either the 4 or 5. So until next time, this time onward to Tonia. Take care, y'all.